This is like one of the 10 commandments of Dynasty Fantasy Football.
That's how I weaponize my fab, or how I use my fab to my fullest extent.
And you know what? There's a lot of times where a guy has a really good boom week. If you scoop him up, somebody else wants to chase those points and give you something in return, cash in.
You know, fantasy football at the end of the day is about winning championships, not creating the youngest, most potential talent.
I think this will help you see what those teams have as a need so you can make trades easier too.
I'll take a third round pick for next year that I'm probably going to use to inchworm up the draft board in that rookie draft, as opposed to necessarily drafting that player. You got to keep next year in mind. You know, go all in the right way. Everybody wants to dominate their league, but it isn't that easy. Today, we're bringing you 12 tips to dominate your league for this season and in the future. As always, if you enjoy the video, please leave a like, comment down below your thoughts. What are the strategies that help you dominate your leagues every year? But hey, with all that said, let's get right to it.
Finally here, the regular season. This is what you wait for. This is why you prep for the draft, your rookie draft, your seasonal drafts. You assembled an awesome roster, we hope, if you're listening to us. So this is it, man. This is important. We're not talking about things like make sure you pay your league fees. You know, here's how you be a good commissioner. You know, we don't care about your feelings. This is how you dominate a league. This is how you manage your league and your roster in season. Nate, we are actually going to start with you on this one. What is your first tip for us?
Know your strengths. Know your strengths as a player, and specifically, in my case, what I'm going to talk about is use start-sit resources, because Dynasty is a fun game. We play it all year round. You know, we like to say, you know, Dynasty Fantasy Football has no offseason. We have strengths. You know, some of us like to scout, like rookie picks. Some of us like to trade. Some of us like to just draft good teams. Some of us are really good at setting lineups and help us win championships. But you know what? I'm actually not that good at setting a lineup. I hate setting a lineup. I hate having to make that choice. I love best ball because I hate setting lineups. If someone asks me to start sit, I'm not the greatest person to ask. There's a lot of great people to ask. There's some people at the Dynasty Rewind who are good to ask. There's some people who are outside of Dynasty Fantasy Football who focus on weekly matchups that you can ask. You know, there's so many resources out there in fantasy football. We provide great Dynasty content, but there's some people out there that provide some really good start sit resources, and they have, like, you know, all their weekly projections. You might even look at like DFS projections. Know your strengths. Use other people's resources to, you know, help your weaknesses and make you a stronger player overall.
And also know your strengths on your team as well. I think we could say not just on starting and sitting. Bob, I love this strategy tip that you have here, but why don't you explain it to everyone what it is?
So I've caught myself in this before. This is me learning from my own mistakes. I think people tend to rule out players on the waiver wire when they're not the sexy names. They're not, you know, rookie players. They're not very appealing stashes. They're kind of flavor of the week. They're popping up in Dynasty. They're not necessarily a long-term asset. But the thing with that is when you rule out guys like a Rex Burkhead, a Justin Jackson, whatever the flavor of the week, 2 weeks running back is that's filling in. But when you rule out guys like that, you're missing out on a lot of opportunity where you might not even necessarily have to be throwing these guys in your lineup. You might actually be looking to trade these guys for fab, for trade picks, or for rookie picks, I should say. And that's how that's how I weaponize my fab, or how I use my fab to my fullest extent, because I'm not somebody who trades for fab. I'm somebody who will go spend it, and to each their own on fab, whatever. But because in my leagues, nobody really values fab, so I can pick up players for usually pretty cheap. I'll go pick up a player for whatever, $5-10, whatever it is, whatever running back of the week it is. Hey, somebody else actually needs a running back. I don't happen to need a running back that week. Here you go, dude. Like, your starting running back went down. I spent more fab than you. Sucks to suck, but here's a guy for you to start this week. I'll take a third round pick for next year that I'm probably going to use to inchworm up the draft board in that rookie draft, as opposed to necessarily drafting that player. So I think, and then in essence, even if you do draft somebody, you do draft a sexy rookie stash, as opposed to, you know, trying to pick up the fifth string wide receiver on the Bills who may or may not ever actually be relevant in this league, even though we like him. So it's just one of those things. Pay attention to the waiver wire. Don't tune out the waiver wire at any point in the season. Rebuilding, contending, does not matter. Pay attention to the waiver wire and don't rule anybody out. Everybody on that waiver wire needs to be an option for you.
And you know what? There's a lot of times where a guy has a really good boom week. If you scoop him up, somebody else wants to chase those points and give you something in return, cash in. I think it's really important to keep your eye on the league as a whole. I know that we always say you will know when it's time for you to contend. You could look at your team, but a lot of times it's looking at the rest of the teams in your league too. You may think that you're not there yet, but you're like, listen, I'm in 4th place somehow with this trash roster. Everybody else in the league is just really a sinking ship. I think I can make a run. You got to see what teams are performing well or poorly. I think this will help you see what those teams have as a need so you can make trades easier too. You can compare strengths and weaknesses across your league. Helps them. But the important thing is it helps you just get a pulse on everything. See what you need to be a contender. See if you are a contender or a pretender. Manage some deals. Do what you have to do. I feel like this is one that's been hammered in everyone's head, but it gets forgotten. And people need to be reminded of it.
This one is one of like the Dynasty Fantasy Football cliches, but it is a very important one. This is like one of the 10 commandments of Dynasty Fantasy Football. And it's that Dynasty is a 2 to 3 year window. Every player that you look at should be in a 2 to 3 year window. What is their, talent level during that time? Are they a rising talent? Are they at their peak talent over that time? Or are they at the end of their career? We all love the young guns. We all love the rookies. But those players who are in the prime, in that 2 to 3 year window, those are the ones that win you championships. And that's what, fantasy football at the end of the day is about, winning championships, not creating the youngest, most potential talent. But also in that same vein, that 2 to 3 year window, when you're looking at moving a first round pick for that missing piece to get you that championship team, think about that 2 to 3 year window, because you can get veterans who still have that 2 to 3 years left at a discount. A guy like Austin Eckler, you're going to be able to trade, some good draft capital for him by the middle of the season, but he could be the missing piece. A guy like Austin Eckler, he's still going to produce next year. 3 years from now, it's a little bit more of a question mark, but we feel pretty good about his situation next year. Marquise Brown, a guy who's not a rookie, he's coming off his rookie deal. Terry McLaurin, guys like that who are off the rookie deals, coming off the rookie deals and aren't the newest flavor of the week. These guys are going to be in their prime over that 2 to 3 year window. They're going to score you the most fantasy points. They're going to have career years during that window. Those are the guys to shoot for when you're trying to win a championship.
So you kind of touched on this already a little bit with these hype players and this. So I'm saying beware about buying into hype. It's less about players on the waiver wire because you're getting those guys fairly cheaply. You're dropping a good amount of fab and flipping them for whatever. That's fine. I'm talking about the guys that every single year we are going to have players that pop off for amazing games. 2 touchdowns, 100 and some yards, like a Travis Fulgham is a great example of a player who popped off, had maybe good potential, had a lot of things pointing in the right direction for him, but obviously just never came to fruition. When we're looking at these cases, we need to take it case by case, evaluate each situation as its own. And does it actually make sense that this player is actually going to be something down the line? Because there were a lot of signs that said Travis Fulgham was not the answer. I believe little to no draft capital, wasn't a huge investment by the Eagles by any stretch of the imagination.
All correct.
And so there was no real reason why you should have been sending first round picks for this guy. Not everyone's going to send first round picks. If you can get a second, whatever, cool. But on the flip coin of that, there are going to be cases where players are popping off and it might be the last chance to buy them at a good price. I think Gabe Davis this year is a prime example of somebody that could be that, who's somebody who's reasonably well valued now, but in Dynasty Keep Trade Cut, he's in like the 40 range. But in redraft rankings, when you look at him, he's in like the 20s. Whereas if he ends up near the 20s this year versus where Dynasty has him, there's going to be a big value gap there and things are going to change quickly where you're not going to be able to get him at the value anymore. But for him, it seems, had reasonable draft capital, is in a top 5 to 10 offense in the league at worst, I'd say, paired with an awesome quarterback, still relatively young. His number one that's paired with him is actually on the way out the door. So when you look at this situation, of buying into the hype on Gabe Davis when it comes, if it comes, versus buying into the hype on a guy like Travis Fulgham that people were buying into, that's not just hyperbole. People were buying into Travis Fulgham thinking he was going to be something. Keep things in mind of buying at a reasonable price regardless. Don't spend crazy amounts of draft capital just because you need a wide receiver, things like that. Be mindful. And again, on another flip coin, be willing to sell those players that pop off. Like you said, Mike, picking up players off the waiver wire. Analyze the hype best you can, project as much as you can, and get decent value. If you're flipping, don't spend a crazy amount if you're trying to buy these guys.
Question for you, follow-up question. Could an example of beware the hype be Dameon Pierce?
Absolutely. I would say, honestly, it might have already happened. We might be in the middle of that already because he was a guy who was mid-second for the most part in rookie drafts, early May. Yeah. And now we're looking at the back end of first. He went at the 103 in my most recent rookie draft, or my last rookie draft. That just happened last week. Ooh. So, and that league is, that league's always been traditionally very heavy drafting running backs early. Running backs do not last very long in rookie drafts, but no, I think that's absolutely the case. But you look at that offense now with Dameon Pierce, and how good are the Houston Texans going to be? How good of a running back is he going to be realistically? Beware of the hype on Dameon Pierce already, because that's already kind of happened.
Here's my next one. I talk about it a ton, but fab is really important. And I know Bob doesn't seem to agree, but if you weaponize it like some like to do, there was a trade that I was trying to pull off with somebody. Okay, it was in late August. And he wanted to give me somebody and another player for another player who got cut. I don't know why. John, what are you thinking? And I was like, well, I'll just take this one back up and you could have Tyler Johnson and give me some fab. He's no fab. $0 fab before the season even starts. How are you going to set waiver claims? We have $250 fab. I haven't used any of it.
Jeez.
So I know that if I put at least one fab dollar down on anybody I want, John can't get him. He can't get that guy. So there may come a time where you need it. A lot of leagues close trading at a certain point and you can't make a trade. You're in the championship game. You're in the playoffs. You need to pick somebody up. You have to outbid somebody. And here's the thing. If I'm not in the playoffs, I'm still going to bid on a player if I think they can help my team in the future. Why wouldn't I? There's no waiver order. It's fab. I'm going to bid on a player because it's Dynasty. That's what you do. So you need to make sure that you're weaponized and you have all the ammunition that you need with your fab. It helps with trades sometimes. Some people like it, like myself. So fab's important. Make sure you have some.
Yeah, my next talking point is take the injury discount if you're a rebuilding team. If, it doesn't matter if you're rebuilding going to the year, if, you decide week 5, week 6 that you're a rebuilding team, take those injury discounts. A couple years ago, Dak Prescott destroyed his ankle. And I traded for Dak Prescott. I traded a play who was not nearly as worthwhile in Dynasty. I can't remember what I traded now, but you know me. I only trade if I win, if I get a good deal. So I traded a player not worth nearly as much as Dak in Dynasty value. But to that team that was a contender, Dak was useless the rest of the season. And they knew they had a championship team. So they took, I don't know what I traded them, but a quarterback of similar production in the season, but less Dynasty value. I was able to acquire Dak on 2 or 3 teams. And then in, the years since, I've been pretty happy with having Dak on my team. And I think I'm going to be happy with Dak being on my team for years to come. If you picked up CMC last year, if you picked him up 2 years ago, you're still probably pretty pissed about it. But if you picked him up last year, you might get something out of it this year. Even a guy like Calvin Ridley, suspend it for the entire season. Calvin Ridley is only 27. He'll come back. He'll be 28. That's supposedly his prime years. He's going to have at least 2 to 3 years of production in whatever situation he'll be in. He'll be in with the Falcons for at least 1 year. But remember that 2 to 3 year window. Calvin Ridley is going to be productive for your team in that 2 to 3 year window, and you can get him really cheap right now. If you don't need his fantasy production this year, those are the guys you can start to chase because you know you're going to get a discount with those guys. It is hard to get a discount in Dynasty Fantasy Football. But that injury discount definitely comes along. If you're a Cam Akers guy, you could have picked up Cam Akers. I picked up some J.K. Dobbins last year. You can probably still pick up some J.K. Dobbins this season, if he doesn't come back fully healthy, but in the 2 to 3 year window, he's going to produce. So use that injury discount to your advantage.
Question. We're saying that this does apply mostly to non-contending teams, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. Hi, Bob.
I don't think it has to be contending teams only, because I think it's one of those things too where, maybe down the road next year, you see the cliff coming for an Alvin Kamara. But you could pick up a guy like J.K. Dobbins for a first-round pick, maybe a little more. So you're kind of drafting a ready-to-go running back next year, I think, more than likely, back a full year removed from the ACL. That actually compares to a good move for a contending team. Now, it's obviously kind of situational in how you're using it. Ideally, you have capital kicking around. If you listen to any of my trade advice, always getting extra picks back. If you have that capital to utilize, not necessarily burn, but you have that capital to utilize to help you down the road, absolutely, I think you can do that as a contending team as well.
Yeah, if you're a contending team, you can use that injury or suspension discount. For example, you go out there right now, you could maybe trade some young rookie who isn't going to produce this year, like a young wide receiver. Maybe Mechie's a good, fun one, but maybe a player who, like Khalil Shakir, maybe a little bit better than that. You can trade those guys, put a little bit on top of it. Go get yourself DeAndre Hopkins. He's cheaper right now. It's going to be more expensive later. You let him sit on your bench for 6 games, and then he's going to produce on your team. Now, you're going to probably need like Khalil Shakir like in a second. But honestly, when DeAndre Hopkins comes back and puts up wide receiver 1 numbers, it's going to cost you at least a first.
When you're looking to go all in, you got to keep next year in mind, and the next years in mind. You can't, or you shouldn't, in my opinion, just mortgage your entire future on winning now or, making short-sighted decisions to add the new hotness, the next Justin Jefferson, whatever it might be. And not saying that's not valuable to do, but especially when, like I said, you're going for that contending player that may only have a couple years left, like a Mike Evans. I'd rather personally go all in by going and paying a little bit more to get like a Deebo Samuel, a younger player who's going to last a little longer. So when I'm spending draft capital to go get him, I'm seeing the return from that, spending that draft capital a heck of a lot longer than I would if I was going to get a Mike Evans, who might be a little cheaper, like I said, but I'd much rather pay the premium, get a little bit back going forward. But ultimately, there's a short game that's happening right now, but there's also a long game that's happening too. And you got to keep that in mind, because otherwise you're going to get surpassed before you know it. And so it's important not to make short-sighted decisions and spend too much in the short term to make up for whatever shortcomings you have. Maybe you need to add a running back, maybe you need to add a wide receiver, whatever the case is, or a tight end. Don't make that short-sighted decision to spend too much and mortgage the future. Go all in the right way. I like to say, spend up to go get those good assets. Absolutely. If you're a wide receiver away, you feel like, from being a championship team, go spend up for a guy who's going to be kicking around for a little longer than a Mike Evans, especially if you're spending similar draft capital to go get them, or similar pieces or value to go get that player.
If we're talking a trade, and this is if I'm not a contending team, don't offer me draft picks that are like years and years away. If it's not within the next year, 2 at the most, depending on the position of where it is in the draft, I don't want it. I see a lot of times people are now offering like 25. I don't want that. If you're going to offer me picks that are that far away, give me a player that's going to have some sort of relevance, like a guy that we think, okay, I think this guy, I'm just going to use Alexander Mattison as an example, and it doesn't have to be him. It could be a player like him. I feel Alexander Mattison is going to be a free agent next year and a starting running back somewhere. A player like that who I think will have some relevance, I want that over a draft pick. The league might not even exist when those draft picks come to fruition. So give me something that has some relevance sooner rather than later. Nate, what is your next one?
Yeah, it kind of goes back somewhat similar to what you said earlier with the, knowing the whole of your league, know where your league mates are, using that as a comparison to know where you are within your league. Are you a contender? Are you maybe needing to retool a little bit? Do you need to make a move to really become a contender? Can you make a move and that's all it takes to be a contender? You need to just start looking at next year and start selling off those older pieces and just look all in to the rebuild. How do you figure that stuff out? We've talked about that on this channel. We've talked about it on the podcast, on the YouTube channel. You get to make that decision quick. I say you want to make that decision by week 5, week 6. You want to be the first one to rebuild, because as soon as those guys start throwing those first round picks around in trades, the people who are receiving those first round picks, they're not going to trade them away again. They're receiving them because they're looking towards next year. They want those draft picks. It's going to be much more expensive to get them off them, that second time around. So, using the points for, the potential points, the points against, not just looking at win-loss record, but really going and exploring the statistics behind your win-loss record, see who's overperforming, who's underperforming. We did a lot of team audits this offseason, and we're going to do them again next offseason, especially if you're a Patreon. And, you can use those to figure out where your team is going into the season, to kind of help you make this decision midway into the season. But knowing where you are and where you're headed with your team is one of the most important things, because all your moves should be based on that goal. Is your goal to win that championship, for the second half of the season? Or is your goal looking at the 2023 championship, because you're almost out already if you're not completely out of the race? If it is, are you doing everything you can to rebuild that team, get better for next year? Because this year, those fantasy points don't matter to you anymore.
An important thing to keep in mind, this year's points don't count next year. Where, yes, Alvin Kamara might be great this year. Yes, Tyreek Hill might be great this year. Yes, Mike Evans might be great this year. And there's a lot of younger players that fit that criteria too, but that doesn't guarantee they're going to be good next year. And that goes the same for the flip of that coin, where just because players are bad this year doesn't mean they're going to be bad next year. Situations are situational. Players that are in bad situations now could have those vastly change. We look at guys like Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Calvin Ridley coming back next year, who aren't in good situations because of their quarterback. But what happens this year, like I said, isn't guaranteed next year. Don't let this influence buying decisions and also selling decisions. You could end up selling low on a guy whose situation is actually looking to pick up next year. Like Nate and I touched on our wide receiver tier rankings video. Drake London is going to be interesting because more than likely he's going to have an off season or he's going to have way below expectation. But you have to look at other things, catchable balls, things like that, catchable targets, whatever, that actually indicate whether or not he was good. You have to look at the advanced analytics and look at the situation around him to see if he was actually bad or if the situation was just awful. It's one of those things, don't get caught up in buying or selling with what happens this year, looking at next year. You, again, going back to a previous point, you have to look at each situation as its own, try to project best you can. Is that situation going to improve? Is it going to get worse? Are these older players, like a Mike Evans, do they have another year after next year or after this year, I should say? Same with the running backs that are, we're calling for the cliff for, and make your decisions that way, because this year does not guarantee next year, whatever it is, good or bad.
This is Dynasty, right?
Yes.
You got to get ahead. You got to stay ahead. What's the best way to get ahead? Now, I always toot our own horn, but I understand you cannot commit an entire weekend to watching football. A lot of people have families or other commitments they have to work, so you have to kind of pick one or the other. I have to pick one. I picked the NFL. I picked the Eagles, so I can't always watch Sean Clifford do what he does. So you got to find some Devy people to follow, like Nate Christian, head of our Devy department right there. Follow some Devy podcasts. You follow people you know and trust. This helps you get ahead and stay ahead of your competition. It's like muscle memory for your brain, essentially. You get these names in your mind, and it really, I feel, when you keep hearing these things over and over again, it helps you form values in your head faster and easier. Do mock drafts as well. Start doing mock drafts in like December with some names that you're hearing, some people that you're familiar with. Start following college. It's really not hard. You don't have time to watch. Look, just bring up ESPN, bring up the scores, look at box scores. If that's all you could do is box score scouting, so you know who's smashing and against what level of competition, write their names down, follow them, and then start doing some film work after the season. Getting the names in here, compiling a list. I have prospects on my computer, on a Google Doc. I see a guy, I see something I like that pops off. I put them on there and I make a note to watch them some more. And I'll tell you what, Bob, would you like to tell everyone our bonus tip? Because you're the man with the plan there.
The bonus tip was not my idea. That was all Nate. So no, Nate can tell you the bonus idea.
It was in a convoluted way, because there's actually a different bonus tip, and then we switched it out because I was copping out of one of our strategies. By just saying, one of the best strategies that you can have this year and in all the years coming for Dynasty Fantasy Football is watching the Dynasty Rewind YouTube channel. Watch the Dynasty Rewind YouTube channel. There is content here 7 days a week, and on some days there's 2 videos. So there is a lot of content coming your way. It's going to, quench your thirst for Dynasty Fantasy Football. We're going to be doing it all throughout the season. We're going to do it all throughout the off season. It's all great. Keep your eyes over here at the Dynasty Rewind YouTube channel. And if you're listening on the podcast, make sure you go subscribe and watch some videos. Get it into your arsenal, because I think we got some good stuff here, guys.
Well, that is it for this video today. I do hope you all enjoyed it and y'all are ready to dominate your leagues. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, comment down below your thoughts. Again, what are the strategies that you employ to dominate your leagues? If you enjoyed this video and you love learning how to dominate your league, I highly recommend checking out this playlist here, where we talk about all the strategies that we have talking Dynasty Fantasy Football. But hey, that's going to be it for me today. I will see y'all in the next one. But until then, y'all have a good one.